Welcome to The Full Experience, the show that helps you understand the greatest shows in television history with just 4 episodes. We watch the first, we watch the ultimate, we watch the lowest rated, and we watch the last. I realize that some people are like, isn't ultimate also always the last? No, the like ultimate rated episode, the highest rated episode, FULL, first, ultimate, lowest, last, gives you the full experience. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Dude, I love the idea that like we have a beef with somebody named like Lawrence Lessig or something, and we're like FULL.
Yeah, with your money and politics talk, you and your Creative Commons, FULL.
Okay, so we are at the beginning of a journey of a new full experience.
Yes,
and
this is so exciting.
I was really surprised when I pitched it that everybody was on board for it. How do we feel about the very first episode, the pilot episode, finally, not a mini series that leads into something, but just a straight up pilot of Sliders?
Oh my gosh, I was so excited that we picked a show where the first episode is called Pilot. It was I have a mistaken note. I'm gonna have to look this up. I have it debuting March 32nd, 1995, because I suppose in some alternate Earth that they slid to, there were 32 days in March. I'm trying to find the actual date of the first episode, but it was in March 1995.
I know it was my sophomore year of college because I
March
remember
22nd, not 32nd. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Before we talk about it, I believe both you and I, Tom, kind of knew the buzz about it going in.
I watched it in 1995.
Same here.
Yeah.
And we knew what it was going to be, and we knew that it was something that we had never seen before. Like, it's in a world where virtually everybody who's hearing this is younger than us, you have to remember there was a time that the very concept of multi-dimensional parallel universes was restricted only to like books and whatnot, and never on primetime on Fox, never produced by John Landis, of the guy who created the #1 music video of all time and American Werewolf in London and so on. On film with Jerry O'Connell from Stand By Me, and I don't know, and John Rhys Davies from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, you have to understand how bizarre. #1, it was shot on film. #2, it was early days of computer graphics, and you can even see moments that they drop down to 15 frames per second, I assume, so that they can save the processing rendering power in order to render certain scenes, with a concept that was morally ambiguous. It was not that there was a great badness in the world. To be honest, Sliders was America's first Doctor Who. Would that be appropriate to say?
I suppose so. Although I was about to compare it to Voyagers. Do you remember, not Star Trek Voyager, but Voyagers?
Voyagers, the guy who's dressed like a pirate who
and they would travel through time and go historical. And that's Doctor Who. Doctor Who travels through time and space. Now, granted, over the years, Doctor Who has become way more spacey and sci-fi than historical, but the roots were very historical.
We should do the full experience on Voyagers. I'm just going to
throw that's a good one. I wonder, we could do the full experience on Doctor Who, the first run, as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Anyway, but
put a pin in those. Yeah.
But the reason I was going to bring up Voyagers, and the reason I'm bringing it up in relation to your suggestion of Doctor Who, is that Sliders was neither of them. Sliders was alternate. So we aren't going through time. We aren't going in history. We're leaving Earth, and we're going exactly where we left. And I don't think anybody's done that. I don't think anybody's done that since. There's been alternate universe stories, but the idea that you're traveling is borrowed from Doctor Who. but you're not going anywhere. You're not moving through time. You're not even moving through space. You're only moving through a dimension that is undefined to an alternate version of where you were.
The closest parallel I could think of would be Quantum Leap, where the conceit was Sam Beckett kept leaping from body to body each time, hoping that the next leap would lead him home.
But he's
Uh,
still in history,
but
right?
and also the only way that he leaps is by doing a good thing. This show is morally ambiguous, which is fascinating
Yeah.
because 1995, this would have been after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, the end of the Cold War, that weird moment that we wondered if we were at the end of history. See as reference Jesus Jones song. The uh, it, it's surreal the level of talent, quality of production. The graphic effects are of their time. I'm gonna, look past that. Um, this pilot really stood up to the test of time. I bet I could tell my children this was a movie from 30 years ago, and they would just straight up believe me.
Yeah. Until it hit like episode 2 coming next, you'd be like, they'd be like, oh, this isn't a movie.
Yeah.
100%. I did think part 2, because when you watch it on streaming now, they break the pilot up into 2 parts. Because it
Oh,
originally
I actually I bought it on Amazon, and as a matter of fact, by my math, it was like 25 minutes before the first commercial break. Is that true or no?
I didn't have commercial breaks, so
Okay.
I
There was like a moment that it faded out to black and then faded
oh
back in.
yeah, you know what? I think there was a commercial break in the fade out to black, but
Yeah, it was like 26 minutes of Jerry O'Connell and his story, and then they fade to black, they come back, and all of a sudden, uh, again, good storytelling, they tell us a totally bizarre story of like a Motown doo-wop singer trying to make a rebound,
yeah,
and,
that is, I believe that's all in part 1.
okay,
And then they travel, and the cliffhanger in the syndicated version is that they have arrived, and they're not sure where they are, right?
right,
um the second half is them realizing they're in an alternate Earth, and realizing that it's the Earth where the Soviet Union won the Cold War, and the United States is under a communist government, which is very much, as you were talking about, very much of its time. But I did think that first part, that first half, the Q story was much tighter than the second half. The second half is where all the juice is, of course, because that's when you get the alternate world, and it carries itself. Um, but all that stuff leading up, I think maybe because I expected, like, yeah, the lead up stuff probably won't be as good as when we actually get to the alternate Earth. I was impressed by how good the lead up stuff was.
so the lead up stuff, I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to be too much of a fanboy right now, but it's like it was almost as good as the opening of Back to the Future. Like it felt like that tight storytelling. For example, the character Diamond of what's his name, Quinn. Um, is entirely told by a careful panning and scanning over all of the gizmos that he has. And we see the books, we see the dinosaurs, we see the molecules, we see the Einstein, we see the whatever. Like before he says a single word, we see him falling asleep with a physics book on his chest, and we see him reach up to his face and being surprised that he fell asleep with his glasses on. We see his mom saying, "God, you're so smart, you're gonna get killed like your dad," and all that stuff. But none of it felt offensively forced. It was a delight. It was really really rich. And even when he makes his first jaunt to a sideways universe, yes, eh, uh, to be honest, it was how can I put this? It made me feel good about hating the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie because they elegantly told, like, what's a sideways universe? I don't know. Green means stop, red means go, in a way that didn't offend me as a person in the movie theater.
Yeah,
Uh,
oh, go ahead.
oh no. Opening tight, 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 tight. Thought it was very, very good.
I loved all those hints that they gave, and they were very clearly hints. Like, let's focus on this creaking gate for some reason. Let's have a unusually long interaction with the homeless guy speaking in the park, and let's linger on that statue of Abraham Lincoln. Let's hear Harry Shearer
Oh,
talk
doggone it.
about
I was hoping
hilarious
you didn't notice it was him.
San Francisco stereotypes. How could you not notice that was him?
I mean, I definitely paused it, and I definitely found out that it was Harry Shearer.
I looked it up too, just to make sure, but I'm like, that's Harry Shearer, right?
For those of you guys who don't know, Harry Shearer is most of the voices in The Simpsons, and was in what's the first mockumentary, the Spinal Tap.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the baseball. He did a great job as a baseball announcer in a comedy for HBO as well.
He was also like in Best in Show and all of that stuff.
I really loved all of that stuff. That's like, you're gonna hear this, because then later the Harry Shearer radio character is on the radio in the alternate world talking about how vinyl is here to stay. Those CDs, they never caught on.
I never really believed in global cooling, but I guess it's happening.
Yeah.
And what's up with all these Americans trying to sneak across the border to Mexico?
Also, I had entirely forgot the border to Mexico thing was a little bit of a stretch, but the stoplight where green means stop, red means go was perfect. Because those are things where, like, how could it possibly mean that? It's like, we just assign them. They don't intrinsically mean that. We think they mean that now because we've been trained to think they mean that. But you could have had it be anything.
I had totally forgotten upon my first viewing the fact that he meets I don't know, 8 jumps earlier Rick. And by the way, I think part of our attraction to this is that this is proto Rick and Morty, right?
Rick and Morty definitely riffs off of Sliders, among thousands of other things. But yeah,
correct,
absolutely.
correct.
Yeah.
But like, he meets Cool Rick basically, and Cool Rick makes out with his, will they, won't they, friend Wade.
Well, and the best part is, I love the
know,
choice of not showing him do that, having our Quinn run into the consequences and be puzzled of, like, what do you mean? What happened? What are you talking about? And then the reveal of, like, oh no, it was Cool Rick the whole time.
Well, and I didn't even mind the sort of clumsy old school, like, why on earth would Quinn put in a VHS tape to watch himself make his own diary or whatever? There's just enough of a question mark of, like, well, maybe he's looking for details or clues.
It's a science trope, right? You record your observations and then you review them. Maybe there's no real reason for him to review that, but it fits the trope, so you kind of go with it. Also love that they put it in San Francisco and they showed the Sharks, the hockey team. They showed the A's. He had an A's hat. Like, he was not a typical San Franciscan. He had a little bit of difference.
Harry Shearer says, hey, I know all you people over in San Francisco have all the money, but I'm talking to the workaday people over in Oakland. Pans over to Oakland A's or whatever. Like, it's good filmmaking and good storytelling, and it's tight, and they do a great job of establishing, okay, we get it, he's very smart, but he's also very committed, he's very honest, he's a promise keeper, he's this, he's that, however, he's driven in this way and that way. I almost feel like we should separate our evaluations from the first half to the second half because I agree. The first half is tight and amazing. And I almost just want to show my daughters the first half and then just say, anyway, there
You
was
can
a
keep
series.
going if you want to. Yeah.
The second half was very, very not just procedural, but kind of lazy procedural.
Well, first of all, it bothered me the route Rembrandt took to the game. And
the fact that he was just kind of thrown in as like, I'm a guy driving along.
I'm like, the part of me is bothered for a ridiculous reason, which is Candlestick's way south. Like he's going to Candlestick Park. He would not be anywhere near any of those things.
Nobody would take the 405 to that route.
The 405 is in Los Angeles.
I said that intentionally to annoy you.
And it worked. So part of that I understand is like, well, that doesn't matter to most people watching this, but also it just felt like he was just toddling along. Like, I don't know. It felt like he would add a little more urgency getting to the game. And it was almost the first time it was a bit unbelievable that the portal just levitated up to the street and took in a car. Because I don't think we ever see that again.
Especially because like I remember watching that moment and thinking, okay, so it only takes humans or living things. Wait, but didn't a basketball go through? And it's like, why wouldn't it take half the street? And well, surely it'll take him, but not the car. No, it took the car.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's before a lot of those rules were established and well known and developed. I adore that they did something so bizarre as to throw a has-been doo-wop singer as a fourth part of the like you have a father-son relationship with Professor and Quinn, right? You have a will they won't they friend relationship with Wade, all of that familiar.
Also named Wade. This is not Shirley or Valerie or some girly name. It's an ambiguous name, which I find
which also is makes sense why he would like be confused. Like, why?
Well, I don't know so much about that. I just thought it was very progressive of them to be like, yeah, we don't need to name the love interest a girly name. You'll get it. In fact, let's make it ambiguous. Maybe she's not just got one persuasion. Let's call them Wade, call him Quinn. Like, I don't know. There's some interesting choices, especially for 1995.
She is pretty sexually ambiguous. But I read that as the reason that he would never even like he was confused. Like, why would I ever kiss you? That's weird.
Because they're friends, right?
Right.
Like she's clearly in the friend zone. Yeah.
Yeah. But all of which is a long way to get to Rembrandt being like, what a wild out of nowhere fourth element to this. It's like, and a has-been doo-wop singer who's trying to be on a comeback.
And he's the everyman. He's the person like
he's Ernie Hudson in the Ghostbusters.
Wade is a geek, just like Quinn. Wade works at the computer store. Professor Arturo knows the physics. Rembrandt is us. Rembrandt is there to go like, can you explain that in words I can understand and not your crazy nerd language?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's the end of the first half. Second half.
Well, yeah, that's the end of the first half. The second half has People's Court in it.
Okay. For our younger audience, there used to be a institution. And by the way, this would later become a fixture of Sliders, is whatever everybody in 1995 knew, they would figure out a way to wedge them in. For example, there's later an episode where it's in an Earth where nobody discovered penicillin. So there's a plague. And when it comes to protecting yourself from the plague, they have this guy like what was it, Ask Mike or something, the guy with the big sweater. He came out and sold a whole bunch of like and these gloves and this mask and that stuff. So it was somebody that everybody had seen in infomercials at 2 a.m. But they brought him up as a current pop culture icon. That's
Actually,
what
that was a
reminded-
cool thing in this episode, is that we saw the lawyer pitching his services in part 1, and then the lawyer is actually an interrogator in part 2, which Quinn recognizes, is like, hey, I know your name, which then unravels them because they're like, he's not supposed to know your name.
right. I really want to dive down the rabbit hole of all the other bits and pieces we remember, but we're doing the full experience, so we have to judge this first episode on its own merits. Which
I will
believe-
say that People's Court segment was way more hilarious then than it was this time around, because it was relevant. It was Judge Wapner was hosting the People's Court at the time.
Well, and the for those of you who don't know, Judge Wapner, like the whole bit was he was the first to, like, obviously it's not a real court. They're being paid to be here. Nobody really cares, but he's gonna play pretend like it's, small claims court. But in this case, the joke is, what if he's a commissar, and is able to sentence 15 years?
Yeah, instead of a small claim, you're getting death.
Yeah, exactly.
But you still get the hilarious interview on your way out of the court.
Can with Doug Llewellyn. Can we bring Amos in here? Amos, did you give this a watch?
I watched the first half of it, the first episode, if you
part 1.
Part 1. I will say 2 things. One, this is a Firefly moment for me, as in, why was my life so busy at the time this was released that I couldn't watch it the first time around? Because this is, March of 1995. I graduated high school in 95, joined the military in 95. I was busy failing my senior year English class so I could graduate from summer school just to go to the Air Force. So I did not catch this at all the first time around. I was aware of its existence, but I was not watching TV. I was jamming the books trying to graduate high school. And 2, how is it that back in 1995 the theories around the multiverse are still relevant today? Like, that was so far ahead of where I was even considering life in 1995, and here it is 30 years later, and it's still top of the mind, still relevant. The science is still there.
Yeah. The people who wrote this were definitely ahead of the game. I mean, Michio Kaku was one of the first physicists to gain notoriety for the multiple worlds theory, and he's featured. Like, one of his books is on Quinn's shelf in that opening pan shot that Brian was talking about earlier.
And like you said, Brian, this holds up so well. The graphics, like it's in a lower resolution than my monitor felt like showing me, but it still held up. The cinematography and the storyline, the acting, all of it holds up to today, and it was a pleasure to watch it. I'd never seen it before, and this was amazing. I can't wait to see more of this.
Well, I have terrible news for you, and good news. The terrible news is we're definitely going to cover the ultimate, the least, and the last. But the good news is you can watch, with our blessing, the entire first season of this, because the first season is wonderfully morally ambiguous, where it's like, oh, hey, this world is totally screwed up. At least we got out of it. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a constant theme of like, well, shouldn't we help them? And they're like, well, no, this is their world. We'd be messing it up. And besides, we have to get back because this might be the time we land home. Which actually, you didn't see this part, Amos, but the ending is that they think they have gotten back to their Earth. They show up and it's Lincoln on the statue. The stoplights are right. The gate doesn't creak as he goes into the house, or the gate creaks. Sorry, the gate is supposed to creak. The gate creaks as he goes into the house, and they're like, everything's great. Everybody stays for dinner because it's the 90s. And they sit down. And suddenly, as we heard earlier, Quinn's dead dad comes walking through the door. Hi, honey. I'm sorry I'm late. And they all look at each other because they all know that his dad passed away and realize they're in the wrong place. Cliffhanger, for the next episode.
That was really understood from the alternate Quinn not being able to finish the timer speech as he got sucked into the portal from his own timer.
Yeah.
So like that was kind of almost a given that was going to be the premise of future episodes of the show. That was the one thing that made it a early on that made it a show and not a movie for me.
I don't know if this could be called a spoiler because I don't know from which episode it is, but there is an episode at some point. I don't think we'll see it in the full experience, but there's some time where some genius in some alternate dimension, they do a trade where it's like, do this morally ambiguous thing and I'll give you the coordinates back to Earth, your Earth. Right. And then they get back and he walks up and they're like, oh my gosh, we made it back home. And they pick up a newspaper and it says, guys, I don't know if this is our Earth. It says here, O.J. Simpson is accused of a double murder. Some other thing happens that is actually happening in the Earth or whatever. And then finally, Quinn walks up and he says, I know one thing. Every time I've ever opened this gate, it's squeaked. That's the real test. No squeak. He's like, guys, I don't think we ended up in the right place. And then they go somewhere else. And then the episode ends with the mom walking out like, well, thank you for finally putting some oil on that old gate.
So that is not in the pilot, but that is our discussion of episode 1 pilot of Sliders. Our next episode will be the ultimate top-rated episode from season 2, episode 8, Post-Traumatic Slide Syndrome. And then for lowest and last, we're going to be watching episodes I've never seen before, Brian, because I never finished watching Sliders. I fell off at some point, always meant to go back and never did. And we're going to be watching episode 8 of season 5, the Java Jive, which is the lowest rated one, and episode 18, the Seer, which is the finale.
So if I remember correctly, this is foreshadowing and with no authenticity because I'm just half remembering what I barely remember. The thing that attracted me to the show was the moral ambiguity, where it's like they had one job and that was to get out of wherever they were and go closer to home. At some point they introduce a villain. They had like an evil version of somebody. They had a master to their Doctor Who, and from what I understand, it got pretty bad. I've never seen them either. I look forward, to seeing them.
Yes, so that is Sliders episode 1, the pilot. And again, for the next episode, watch the ultimate top-rated episode, season 2, episode 8, Post-Traumatic Slide Syndrome. We will give you more of the full experience next time.